"Sorry, sir, your name isn't on the guest list," said the club security guard, checking the tablet at the entrance for the third time. I stood in front of the Grand Oak Country Club, wearing my best gray suit, holding the invitation I had designed myself. The invitation to my own sister's wedding. "There must be a mistake," I replied calmly, adjusting my tie. "I'm Richard Hayes, the bride's brother." The man exchanged uncomfortable glances with the event planner, an elegant middle-aged woman who held a clipboard like a weapon. Her fingers drummed nervously against the polished wood as other guests began to crowd behind me. "One moment, please," she muttered, disappearing into the club with hurried steps. As I waited under the scorching June sun, I watched the other guests file in freely. I recognized several faces: Madison's coworkers, college friends, distant relatives I barely knew. All carrying the same invitations I had spent 3 months creating for free. Pearlescent paper invitations with custom typography and floral illustrations that took weeks to perfect. An elderly woman with silver hair walked past me and stopped. "Dear, aren't you Madison's brother? The talented designer?" "That's me," I replied, forcing a smile. "What a wonderful job you did with the invitations. I kept mine as a souvenir. So elegant." She walked in without a problem while I stood there, treated like an intruder. My mother Diana appeared at the entrance 15 minutes later, wearing a navy blue dress that cost more than my monthly rent. The fabric was imported from France. I knew that because she had called me 3 times while shopping to tell me every detail. Her eyes narrowed when she saw me, that expression I had known since childhood whenever she had to deal with something inconvenient. "Richard, what are you doing here?" The question hit me like a punch in the stomach. Not "why are you late," or "where have you been?" Just "what are you doing here," as if I were a pushy salesman who had ignored the no trespassing sign. "I came for Madison's wedding," I replied, keeping my voice steady despite the lump forming in my throat. Where else would I be on a Saturday at 3 in the afternoon? She sighed dramatically, the same sigh I had known since childhood whenever I did something that disappointed her. The same sigh when I won art awards at school while Madison got poor grades. The same sigh when I got a full scholarship to college while she had to pay Madison's tuition. "Richard, honey, did you really think you'd be invited? After all your recent behavior?" Attitudes. As if questioning why my name never appeared in family photos on Facebook was a problematic attitude. As if asking why I was never mentioned when she bragged about family accomplishments to her friends was inappropriate behavior. "Mom, I designed all the wedding materials. The invitations, the programs, the place cards, the menus, the personalized napkins. I worked on this for months." I remembered the sleepless nights in my studio, tweaking every detail to Madison's increasingly specific demands. "The font needs to be more elegant," she would say. "Mom thinks the gold isn't shiny enough." I redid everything without complaint, thinking I was finally contributing to something important in the family. "And we're grateful for your work," she said, in the tone she would use to dismiss a temporary employee. "But this is an intimate event, just for people who are really close to the family." People who are really close to the family. The words echoed in my mind as I processed what was happening. Close like Ethan's accountant, whom I had seen coming in 5 minutes earlier. Close as his mother's co-workers, whom Madison had known for less than a year. "My name is Richard Hayes, I'm 29 years old, and I just found out that I'm not considered family by my own family. I grew up as the youngest child in a middle-class home in Beacon Hill, always living in the shadow of my sister Madison, who is 3 years older than me. While she was popular and outgoing, receiving constant praise for her captivating personality, I was the quiet kid who preferred drawing to playing football. Dad used to say I had an eye for beauty, always encouraging my artistic endeavors while Mom sighed and asked when I would develop more practical interests. After my father's sudden death when I was 15, a massive heart attack during an important presentation at work, my mother's favoritism toward Madison became even more apparent. It was as if, having lost the only adult who valued me, I had become invisible in my own home. I graduated with honors in graphic design, built my own studio in Cambridge that served clients like famous restaurants and tech startups, but it never seemed to impress my family. Madison graduated with a degree in social media after 5 years of college, worked briefly in public relations before marrying Ethan, heir to a wealthy family, and suddenly became the golden daughter who could do anything. During the 3 months of wedding planning, I had access to more information than I should have. Emails exchanged between Madison and Ethan. Conversations I overheard during planning meetings. Financial documents I saw when I dropped off proofs. What I discovered would change everything. I understand completely, I said to my mother, forcing a smile I had perfected over years of family disappointments. I wouldn't want to ruin such a special event. The relief on her face was unmistakable. She had expected tears, pleas, an embarrassing scene that would further justify my exclusion. Maybe even beg to be included, giving her the satisfaction of rejecting me publicly once again. Instead, I turned and walked calmly back to the parking lot, each step measured and controlled. My posture remained straight, my face serene, as if I were simply going to get something from the car. But while she thought she had won this battle for good, Diana Hayes didn't know one crucial thing. I had already discovered the secret that would destroy not only this perfect wedding, but the entire facade our family had built. During the 3 months of creating the wedding materials, I had access to much more than just design specifications. I had access to private emails between Madison and Ethan discussing how to hide her debts before the wedding. Financial documents showing that Ethan's thriving business was actually a front for laundering his father's money. Conversations accidentally recorded on my phone during meetings where they mocked less fortunate relatives they would have to tolerate at the wedding. And now, sitting in my car in the parking lot, watching the guests celebrate inside through the club's glass windows, I opened my laptop and began typing the first email in a string that would turn this perfect day into a nightmare they would never forget. The first message was to Robert Sullivan, an investigative journalist at the Boston Globe who had asked for my help with presentation design the previous year. The second was to Amanda Chun, an IRS auditor I had met at a networking event. The third was to Marcus Thompson, a private investigator specializing in financial fraud. Each email contained carefully organized attachments. Documents, recordings, evidence I had collected not out of malice, but out of professional curiosity that turned into devastating discoveries. If you're following this story and want to find out how an underrated graphic designer can destroy an entire marriage using only the truth, be sure to subscribe to the channel. Because while they were toasting inside, thinking they had gotten rid of the inconvenient brother, the real party was just getting started. As I drove away from the Grand Oak Country Club, memories began to flood back. Each memory now took on new meaning, like pieces of a puzzle finally fitting together to reveal a devastatingly clear picture. Diana Hayes had always been a woman obsessed with social status. She grew up in a working-class family in Southie, but managed to marry up when she met my father, Richard Sr., a successful accountant. She never forgot where she came from and spent her entire life trying to distance herself from those origins, using my successes and Madison's as stepping stones to climb the Boston social ladder. The difference was that Madison was always the perfect daughter for Mom's social climbing plans. Blonde, outgoing, with the kind of beauty that opened doors in exclusive circles. I, on the other hand, was the artistic introverted son who preferred libraries to parties and constantly embarrassed her with my weird hobbies. When Dad died, any pretense of equal love disappeared completely. Madison became Diana's main project, while I became an inconvenience to be tolerated. I remember my college graduation clearly. I had been chosen as class valedictorian and won 3 awards for excellence in design. Mom arrived late, complaining about traffic, and spent the entire ceremony on the phone with the organizer of Madison's bridal shower. During the speech I had rehearsed for weeks, she didn't even look up from her phone. Later, at the celebration dinner, she spent 2 hours talking about how Madison had landed an unpaid internship at a public relations firm. "Just imagine," she said to my grandparents, "our Madison working with such important people." My awards weren't even mentioned. Madison, for her part, always took advantage of this favoritism with the casual cruelty of someone who never had to fight for attention. She had a knack for turning my moments of pride into opportunities to shine. When I opened my design studio, for example, she announced at the same family dinner that she was thinking about taking a photography class. Suddenly, the conversation turned entirely to Madison's natural artistic talent, and how she would probably be better at it than Richard too, like she's always been at everything. The worst episode happened 3 years ago, during our paternal grandmother's funeral. I had put together a memorial video with old family photos, working on it for weeks as a way to honor the woman who had always supported me. The video was playing when Madison interrupted to announce her engagement to Ethan. "Sorry to interrupt," she said, not looking the least bit sorry, "but we couldn't wait to share our happy news with you all." Mom literally applauded. During her own mother-in-law's wake. And Ethan? Ethan Reynolds was the embodiment of everything Diana had ever wanted for our family. heir to a fortune made in real estate, a Harvard graduate with connections that stretched from Wall Street to Martha's Vineyard. He saw people like us, middle-class Bostonians, as entertainment. He had a condescending way of talking to me, always asking about my art projects in the tone you use when talking to a child about their crayon drawings. During the months of wedding preparations, I got a privileged glimpse of what they were really like when they thought no one was paying attention. I was delivering the menu proofs when I overheard Madison talking to a friend on the phone. Of course, we're not inviting Dad's poor cousins. Ethan would be mortified. It's bad enough having to put up with Richard wandering around in his hand-me-downs. Ethan laughed in a way that made me realize this kind of conversation was routine between them. On another occasion, I found an email accidentally printed on their printer when I went to get the final approvals for the invitations. It was correspondence between Ethan and his accountant about how to minimize financial exposure by marrying Madison, who apparently had problematic spending habits that would need to be managed. But it was what I found on Madison's laptop that really changed everything. I was tweaking the layout of the wedding website when she asked me to use her personal computer. The password is Princess M 2024, she said, leaving to take a call. An email notification popped up on the screen. It was a conversation between her and our cousin Jennifer, who lives in Chicago. Jen, I need to tell you a secret. Richard has always been kind of obsessive about me. Like, in a weird way. Mom is worried that he'll make a scene at the wedding or try to ruin my special day. We really shouldn't invite him. You know how he gets when he's not the center of attention. My blood ran cold. Obsessive? In a weird way? She was literally rewriting our family history, painting me as some kind of dangerous threat to justify my exclusion. But there was more. Much more. I discovered that they had a WhatsApp group called Operation Perfect Day that included Mom, Madison, Ethan, and even some of the bridesmaids. The messages were a detailed documentation of how to keep undesirable elements away from the wedding. Richard texted asking about the rehearsal, Madison wrote. Anyone have ideas on how to discourage him without being too obvious? Tell him it's just for close family, Mom replied. Technically, it's true. Perfect, Ethan wrote. The less unnecessary drama, the better. Unnecessary drama. That's how they saw me. I photographed every conversation, every email, every document. Not out of malice at first, but out of a growing need to understand whether I was being paranoid or if what I suspected was really happening. Now, sitting in the parking lot of the mall where I had stopped to process everything that had happened, I knew I wasn't crazy. I had been systematically excluded from my own family, and they had orchestrated it with the precision of a military operation. But while they celebrated their victory inside the club, thinking they had finally gotten rid of their inconvenient brother, they didn't know that I had discovered something that would turn this perfect day into a public nightmare. During my accidental investigation of their digital lives, I discovered that Ethan's company was being investigated for money laundering. That Madison had lied about her education on 3 different resumes. And most importantly, I found out exactly who the right journalists, auditors, and investigators were to share this information with. Because if they wanted to treat me like an outsider, I was going to show them what a highly motivated outsider with access to the right information could do. Their party was just getting started, but the main show hadn't even begun. 3 hours after the wedding, my phone started ringing incessantly. It was Stephanie, my best friend since college, who had seen the wedding photos posted on Instagram by other guests. Richard, where the hell were you? I saw Madison's wedding hashtag and you're not in any of the photos. Not even the family photos. I explained what had happened, each word coming out with a calmness that surprised even me. Stephanie was silent for a long moment before exploding. They did what? Richard, that's psychologically devastating. You need to sue them, expose them publicly, do something. I will do something, I replied, looking at the evidence organized on my laptop. But not the way you think. As we spoke, I received a notification on my phone. Madison had posted a photo of herself with Mom and Ethan on Instagram, with the caption, "My perfect family on my perfect day. Surrounded only by true love today." True love. The words burned like acid. But it was my Aunt Rebecca's comment that really broke me. Where's Richard? I don't see him in any of the photos. Madison's response came 20 minutes later. Some family members chose not to attend. We respect their difficult decisions. Chose not to participate. She had turned my forced exclusion into my decision, painting me as someone who deliberately boycotted his own sister's wedding. At that moment, something crystallized inside me. For years, I had accepted being the neglected son, the forgotten brother, the inconvenient relative. I had always believed that if I was good enough, talented enough, successful enough, they would finally see me. But now I understood the truth. They saw me perfectly well. And they consciously chose to discard me. The Monday after the wedding, I returned to work trying to maintain normalcy. But my colleagues' questions about how the family wedding had been stabbed me repeatedly. I made up vague excuses about intimate events until Jessica, my partner at the studio, pulled me aside for a private conversation. "Richard, you look devastated. What really happened at that wedding?" Jessica Chun was more than a business partner. She had become a confidant over the 5 years we had worked together. I told her the whole story, from the exclusion to the evidence I had uncovered. Her eyes widened when I showed her some of the conversations from the Operation Perfect Day group. "Richard, this is pure sociopathy. And this evidence of their illegal activities," she paused, processing the implications. "You have enough material to destroy them completely." "I know," I replied. "The question is, should I? The question is, why shouldn't you?" That night, I went to dinner alone at Joe's Bar, a dive near my apartment where I went when I needed to think. I was on my second whiskey when someone sat down next to me at the bar. "You look like someone who just survived a funeral," said Marcus Sullivan, an investigative journalist at the Boston Globe whom I knew casually from the gym. "Worse," I replied. "I survived a wedding." He laughed, but he could tell I wasn't joking. "Want to talk about it?" On impulse, I decided to tell him. Marcus listened with growing interest, especially when I mentioned the financial irregularities I had uncovered. "Richard, you're sitting on a journalistic bombshell. The Reynolds family has tentacles all over Boston's political and business elite. If half of what you're telling me is verifiable—" "It's all verifiable," I interrupted, showing him some screenshots on my phone. Marcus ordered another drink for both of us. "Can I ask you a sensitive question? Why didn't you expose this before?" The answer came without hesitation, because there was still a part of me that hoped they would love me. And now I know that their love was always conditional. And the conditions were impossible to fulfill. Marcus was silent for a moment, then said, "You know that if you decide to go ahead with this, there's no turning back, right? Once this information becomes public, your family will never be the same." "My family never really included me," I replied. "Maybe it's time to stop protecting people who wouldn't protect me." I left the bar with Marcus' card in my pocket and a decision crystallized in my chest. On Wednesday, I got an unexpected call from Madison. "Richard, we need to talk. Mom is really upset about your behavior at the wedding. You embarrassed everyone. It was really immature of you." My behavior embarrassed everyone. Her audacity was impressive. "Madison, I was barred from attending your wedding after working on it for free for 3 months. Well, you've always been a little dramatic about these things. The important thing is that we can now move forward as a family." "Move forward as a family?" "Yes. Ethan and I were thinking, maybe you could design our honeymoon Christmas cards? Obviously, we'd have to be very specific about the style we want." The disconnect from reality was so complete that I almost laughed. She really thought I would continue to be the helpful, invisible brother, available to provide free services while being systematically excluded from any real recognition or inclusion. "I'm not doing the Christmas cards, Madison." "Why not? You've always made a point of helping the family." "Because we're not a family," I replied, and hung up. That night, I organized all the documents, recordings, and evidence into carefully categorized folders. Financial documents showing Ethan's money laundering. Emails proving that Madison had lied on multiple job applications. Evidence that Mom had falsified information to get loans. Most importantly, I had all the conversations from the Operation Perfect Day group chat, showing exactly how they had orchestrated my exclusion while benefiting from my work. On Thursday, I called Marcus Sullivan. "Are you still interested in that story?" "Have you decided?" "I've decided. But there's one condition: I want the story to run on Sunday, on the first anniversary of their wedding." Marcus laughed. "Timing is everything in journalism. I'll need 48 hours to verify everything and write the story. You'll have all the evidence by noon tomorrow. I hung up the phone and looked out my apartment window at the lights of Boston. For 29 years, I had tried to be the son and brother they wanted me to be. Always adapting, always trying to please, always hoping that this time would be different. But it wouldn't be different. It never would be. And finally, for the first time in my life, I was okay with that. Because if they wanted to treat me like a stranger, I was going to show them exactly what a motivated and well-informed stranger could do when he stopped trying to protect people who never tried to protect him. The real party was just getting started, and this time, I was going to be the host. Friday arrived, and I had exactly 48 hours to organize the most comprehensive exposé possible. Marcus had agreed to my timeline, but warned that we would need at least 3 independent sources for each claim. Investigative journalism isn't revenge porn, Richard, he said during our meeting at the cafe near the Globe. I need this to be bulletproof, especially considering the Reynolds political power. I spent the weekend turning my apartment into a command center. I printed out all the documents, organized timelines, and created maps of connections between Ethan's companies and the politicians who attended family events. The first breakthrough came when I decided to dig deeper into the public relations firm where Madison had worked before the wedding. A call to a former college classmate revealed that Madison had never actually been an employee. She showed up once a week for important meetings, Jennifer explained. She was basically a pretty face to impress investors. Her salary came from a separate account, not the official payroll. Separate account. That suggested money being moved around undeclared. I called Amanda Chun, my auditor friend at the IRS, who agreed to do a preliminary review of the documents. Saturday night, while reviewing the emails from the Operation Perfect Day group, I discovered something that completely changed my strategy. There was a conversation I hadn't seen before. Madison to Mom, Ethan is nervous about having Richard around during the honeymoon. He thinks Richard might find out about the Miami office. Miami office. Business that couldn't appear on the wedding documents. I called a former client of mine, the owner of a detective agency in South Beach, who agreed to ask some discreet questions. On Sunday, my phone rang. It was Madison. Richard, we need to talk urgently. Ethan wants to offer you a job. Like a real job with good money. A job. After cutting me out of the wedding, now they wanted to buy me off. What kind of job? Design manager for all of his properties. 6-figure salary, full benefits. I'm interested, I lied. Can I stop by around 5? I decided to accept the invitation. It would be interesting to see how far they would go to try to manipulate me, and maybe I could get some confessions on tape. At Madison and Ethan's house, I was greeted with overly warm smiles. Mom was there too, wearing her best dress. Ethan led me to the couch and started showing me slides about the future of Reynolds Holdings. Hotels, residential complexes, shopping centers spread across 3 states. The starting salary would be $120,000 a year, he said casually. Plus bonuses, company car, premium health insurance. If you're following this story of family manipulation and want to see how she ends up, don't forget to subscribe to the channel to find out all the twists and turns that are yet to come. That's very generous, I replied, pretending to consider it seriously. Why the sudden change of heart? I've been thinking about the importance of keeping talent in the family, Ethan said, sliding a contract across the table. And there's a little confidentiality clause. Standard industry practice. I glanced over the contract. The clause was actually a disguised gag order, prohibiting me from discussing any aspect of the Reynolds business with anyone, including the media or authorities. They knew. Maybe they didn't know the specific details, but they knew I had discovered something. I need to think about it, I said, closing the contract. I left their house at 7 that evening with a complete recording of the conversation on my phone. They had given me additional evidence that they knew about questionable activities and were trying to cover them up. In the car, I called Marcus. I have more material. And I just recorded them trying to buy me off. When I got home, I had a message from my contact in Miami. He had found documents about Ethan's shell office that suggested money laundering involving casinos and front companies. On the eve of publication, I got one last call from Madison. Richard, you still haven't signed the contract. Ethan is getting impatient. I'll sign it tomorrow, I lied. Perfect. You know how anxious he gets about legal matters. Legal matters. She had confirmed that they knew exactly what they were trying to protect me from. In less than 12 hours, Marcus's story would be published online. They thought they had neutralized me with money and empty promises. They didn't know that every attempt to silence me only strengthened my resolve. Tomorrow, the whole world would know exactly what kind of people Diana, Madison, and Ethan really were. And I would finally be free from the illusion that I would ever be accepted by a family that never deserved me. Sunday, 6 in the morning. Marcus's article went live online with a headline that still gives me chills: "The Fake Empire, How a Boston Family Built a Fortune Through Fraud and Money Laundering." My phone started ringing at 6:15. It was Madison. "Richard, what the hell is this?" Her voice was an octave higher than normal. "There's an article in the Boston Globe with our names in it." "I don't know what you're talking about," I replied calmly, drinking my morning coffee. "Maybe you should read it more carefully." I read it. It's full of lies about Ethan, about me, about Mom. And there are photos of our private documents. How did they get that? How did they get that? She hadn't connected the dots yet. "Madison, are you sure it's lies? Because Globe reporters are very thorough about fact-checking." Silence on the other end of the line. Then a slow, dangerous breath. "You did this." It wasn't a question. Did I do what? "You gave them this information." "Madison, I'm at home having breakfast. I don't know what you're talking about." My phone is ringing off the house hanging. There are reporters at my door. The neighbors are watching. Ethan is having a panic attack. The call ended abruptly. 15 minutes later, Mom called. Her voice had that icy tone I knew from childhood when she was truly furious. "Richard Hayes, you have two choices. Either you call that reporter right now and retract everything you said, or you will never be part of this family again." "Mom," I replied calmly, "you showed me yesterday that I'm no longer part of this family. Don't play games with me, young man. You know very well that there was a misunderstanding." "A misunderstanding?" My voice finally took on a note of anger. "Diana, I was prevented from walking down the aisle in the wedding I planned myself. After 3 months of unpaid work." "You're being dramatic." "I'm being honest. And apparently, honesty is something new in this family." By 9 in the morning, the article had spread across social media. The hashtag Reynolds scandal was trending on local Twitter. Friends started sending me screenshots with devastating comments. I always knew there was something wrong with that family. Who else felt sorry for the brother who got excluded from the wedding? Plot twist: the rejected brother had the evidence all along. At 10, my phone rang again. It was Ethan. "Richard, we need to talk. In person. Now." His voice was different. Gone was the casual arrogance, the condescending tone. There was barely contained panic. "Sure, Ethan. Where would you like to meet?" "Whole Foods parking lot in Harvard Square. 15 minutes. When I arrived, Ethan was leaning against his BMW, smoking nervously. He looked like he had aged 5 years since yesterday. Dark circles under his eyes, wrinkled clothes, hands shaking slightly. "Richard," he said when I approached him, "we need to resolve this." "Resolve what?" "This situation. The article. You know it could destroy innocent lives, right?" Innocent lives. The irony was delicious. "Ethan, can you explain to me exactly what part of the article isn't true?" He paused, calculating his response. "Look, some businesses are complex. But that doesn't mean they're illegal. And Madison, she was just trying to build a career." Build a career lying about her education? Everyone exaggerates a little on their resume. "Ethan," I interrupted, "you cut me out of my own sister's wedding. Then you tried to buy me off to keep me quiet. Why should I help you now?" He studied me for a long moment, as if seeing me for the first time. "How much do you want?" "I'm sorry." "To make this go away. To say you made it all up. How much?" The question hit me like a punch. Even now, with everything falling apart around him, Ethan still thought everything had a price. "This isn't about money, Ethan." "Everyone has a price, Richard." 200,000? 500,000. No. 1 million. Last. I looked into his eyes and saw something I had never seen before, genuine fear. Not of scandal, not of public exposure. Fear that, for the first time in his life, he had found someone he couldn't buy. The only thing I want, I said calmly, is for you to admit what you did. Publicly. His expression hardened. That's not going to happen. Then there's nothing more to discuss. I started to walk away when I heard his voice behind me, lower but laden with menace. Richard, you don't know who you're dealing with. My family has lawyers. Resources. We can make your life a living hell. I stopped and turned slowly. Ethan, for the past 5 years, you've made my life hell. The difference is that now I'm not pretending it's normal. That afternoon, Mom showed up at my apartment. I was waiting for her. She walked in uninvited, standing tall and straight like she did when she wanted to intimidate me. But there was something different today. Her movements were less confident, her voice less authoritative. Richard, you destroyed our family. No, I replied, closing the door. I exposed our family. That article. People are avoiding us. The neighbors don't say hello. Madison is getting strange looks at work. Maybe you should have thought about that before you excluded me from the wedding. She studied me with that expression I knew so well, as if she were trying to find the right angle to manipulate me. Son, her voice took on a softer tone, I know that over the last few years you've felt that maybe you haven't gotten all the attention you deserve. Attention he deserves. As if family love were a privilege to be earned. Diana, I'm going to give you a chance to make this right. One chance. She leaned forward, hopeful. Call Marcus Sullivan. Set up an interview. Tell him the truth about how you treated me over the years. Admit that you deliberately excluded me from the wedding. And apologize. Publicly. The hope disappeared from her eyes immediately. That's ridiculous. I'm not going to humiliate myself publicly because of your hurt feelings. Then there's nothing left to discuss. She stood up, regaining her imperial posture. You've always been ungrateful, Richard. Your father would be ashamed of you. The mention of my father was the last straw. My father, I said slowly, would be the first to applaud what I'm doing. He knew how to recognize character. You never did. Her face contorted with a rage I had never seen before. You want war, Richard? You can have it. But remember one thing, you may have destroyed our reputation, but we are still your family. And families know where to hurt the most. After she left, I sat down in my chair and opened my laptop. Marcus had sent me an email. Second part of the article comes out tomorrow. You need to see this. The attachment was a draft titled, The Forgotten Brother, How a Graphic Designer Brought Down a Family Empire. It was my story. Complete, documented, verified. As I read, my phone rang one last time. It was Madison, but her voice sounded different. Broken. Richard, you won. Are you happy now? Madison, this was never about winning. Then what was it about? It was about being seen. About being respected. About being treated like real family, not like a disposable employee. Silence. What now? She finally asked. Now you learn to live with the consequences of your choices. Just like I've learned to live with mine. When I hung up, I looked out the window at the lights of Boston. Tomorrow, the second part of the story would be published. The whole world would know not only about the financial crimes, but about how cruel a family can be to its own members. For the first time in 29 years, I was no longer invisible. And finally, that was enough. 6 months after the articles were published, the final consequences were unfolding exactly as I had predicted. Ethan Reynolds was indicted on charges of money laundering, tax evasion, and corporate fraud. The federal investigation that began with the evidence I provided expanded to include 3 other states and uncovered a web of corruption that involved local politicians and influential businessmen. His sentence, 15 years in federal prison and confiscation of assets worth $22 million. Madison lost her job 2 weeks after the second article was published. No public relations firm in Boston wanted to associate its name with someone whose professional lies were publicly documented. She tried to move to other cities, but the internet never forgets. She currently works part-time at a clothing store in Portland, Maine, using her maiden name. Diana Hayes faced the worst fate of all for someone like her: complete social isolation. Her friends from the club stopped answering her calls. Neighbors avoided her in the grocery store aisles. She lost her house to foreclosure after legal costs consumed her savings defending Ethan, and now she lives in a one-bedroom apartment in Quincy. But the most significant transformation happened to me. 3 months after the articles were published, I received an unexpected call. It was Jennifer Walsh, CEO of the largest design agency in the country, based in New York. "Richard, I read about your story and your work. We are looking for someone with your integrity and talent to lead our Boston division." The offer included a salary that tripled my previous income, profit sharing, and complete creative autonomy. More important than the money was the professional recognition I had always sought. "Why me?" I asked during our face-to-face interview. "Because someone who maintains his ethical standards even when it costs him dearly is exactly the kind of leadership we want," she replied. "And because your portfolio shows impressive artistic growth over the last few months." She was right. The pieces I created during and after the family crisis had an emotional depth that my previous work never possessed. Pain transformed into art. I moved into a loft in Back Bay, 5 times larger than my previous apartment. I hired an assistant, Jessica, who had become a true friend throughout the process. My professional life flourished in ways I never imagined possible. More importantly, I began to build the family I always deserved. Stephanie organized a housewarming dinner, inviting people who truly cared about me. Marcus Sullivan came, along with Amanda Chun, who had become a close friend after our collaboration on the investigation. Several clients who respected my work. Colleagues from my new company who valued my contribution. Looking around the table that night, surrounded by people who chose me for who I was, not out of family obligation, I finally understood what it meant to belong somewhere. "Richard," Marcus said, raising his wine glass, "you taught us that sometimes the greatest courage is to stop trying to be accepted by people who will never value us." The phrase echoed around the room, and everyone raised their glasses. In that moment, I realized that victory wasn't in their fall, but in my rise. 6 weeks ago, Madison called me for the first time since the publications. "Richard," her voice was different, smaller, more humble. I wanted to apologize. I listened silently as she talked about therapy, about how she finally understood what she had done, about how our mother had shaped her to compete with me instead of loving me. "I don't expect forgiveness," she said finally. "I just wanted you to know that I recognize that you have always been a better person than any of us." "Madison," I replied after a long pause, "thank you for calling. It means a lot." I didn't say I forgave her, because I was still processing 29 years of pain. But I didn't say I wouldn't forgive her either. Some wounds need time to heal completely. Mom never called. And I found that it didn't hurt me anymore. Last week, I was looking through family photos I had saved in an old album. I found a photo from the last Christmas we spent together as a family, before Dad died. I was 12, Madison was 15. We were all genuinely smiling. I didn't feel anger looking at that photo. I felt gratitude. Gratitude for having had a father who saw me and loved me completely, even if only for a short time. Gratitude for the lessons this terrible experience taught me about resilience, self-worth, and the difference between blood family and chosen family. And gratitude for the understanding that I deserve to be loved exactly as I am. Today, 6 months later, I work with clients who respect my creativity, live in a house I decorated to my own taste, and hang out with people who genuinely enjoy my company. I no longer need to prove my worth to anyone because I finally understand that it was never in question. The family I always sought was not the one I was born into, but the one I built with people who chose me back. If this story of family rejection, clever revenge, and personal reconstruction touched your heart, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. We have many other stories about people who turned their greatest humiliations into their greatest victories. Because sometimes, the people who reject us are doing us the biggest favor of our lives, forcing us to discover that we are much stronger and more valuable than we ever imagined. The last time I saw Diana Hayes, she was at the grocery store wearing clothes I recognized from 5 years ago, paying for her groceries with coupons. She saw me too, but quickly looked away and headed down another aisle. Me? I was picking out wines for a dinner party I was hosting that night to celebrate the opening of my new art gallery. Yes, I opened a gallery as a side project. That's the good life for you.